Carroll Anthony was in the Navy's Flag Corps. Before using the radio to signal ships, people in the Flag Corps sent messages to passing ships providing information about their ship or other ships in the area.
Robert Ferguson was an experimental group of the Army that rode motorcycles. His group would scout ahead before the rest of their battalion.
Tom Proctor was a corporal in the Army from 1940 to 1942. Mr. Proctor worked with a squad on the atomic bomb in New Mexico, and then was stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma.
Bob Ferguson's duty was Army intelligence. He was given secret messages and had to decipher them and then figure out where the secret message was supposed to go. If you ever have seen a movie with a guy whose wrist is handcuffed to a briefcase, that was him. His secret office was located in a cemetery.
Fred Hansen served in the Air Force. His rank was corporal. His assigned duty was supply technician. He served 3 years, 1942 to 1945. He enlisted in October 1942 and took pilot training. After 60 hours of flying, it was decided that he should pursue ground work. Then he attended a supply technician school and was sent to join an air service squadron. He served for 2 years in North Africa, Sardinia, Corsica, and Italy. It was his job to order all of the necessary parts and supplies to keep the planes flying their mission.
James P. Carney served in the Army Infantry. His rank was a sergeant. His assigned duty was squad leader and rifleman. He served from 3/18/43 to 1/12/45. He was in 12 weeks of training at Camp Butner, North Carolina, where he learned discipline and rifle training for infantry. He was in the battles and campaigns in Ardennes and Rhineland. He received the Purple Heart with 1 oak leaf cluster, Good Conduct Medal, World War I Victory Medal, and American Theater Service Medal.
Chuck Christianson served in the United States Army. Chuck's rank was technical sergeant, and his assigned duty was chief clerk. He served from February 1st, 1943 to February 1st, 1946. He served with the OSS, Office of Strategic Services. The OSS provided intelligence to the USA generals on the movement of enemy supplies and troops. In England, he recruited people from Europe to be trailed and then be dropped by parachute at night behind enemy lines. They were reported back to England by radio messages encoded and sent by Morse code at night to stations in England. The information was used to dispatch troops to fight the enemy or to destroy supplies by bombing. Sometimes Americans were also dropped behind enemy lines. His job was to provide clerical services for the radio stations. I was stationed in London, which was bombed by V-1 rocket planes and V-2 rockets fired through the stratosphere over the channel. Of course, those planes and rockets carried high explosives, causing many deaths and destroying much property.
Walter Bott Ostrand served in the U.S. Naval Air Force. He was ranked a Radio Man 3C from U.S. Ulster Calv. He served from July 1st, 1943 through May 1946. The base he served on trained a coordinated flight wings or fighter plane F-4F, F-6F, and torpedo bombers TBM, TBF. They finished practicing for carrier landing and then proceeded to Pacific areas. His responsibilities were base communication, radio, teletype, and telephone.
Chuck Slott served in the Navy, ranked as a QM-3C, and his duty was navigation. He served from February 4th, 1943 to February 5th, 1946. He joined the Navy just after he had graduated from high school. He first went to boot camp for laser training and then went to quartermaster school. He was sent to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, where he was assigned to the battleship 2188, Pennsylvania. They left Pearl Harbor and went to the South Pacific. Their main job was to bombard the island to clear the beaches before our troops landed to drive the Japanese from the island.
Frank Sullivan served in the Army from 1943 to 1945 as a combat engineer. He was third wave on D-Day. Mr. Sullivan both built and blew up bridges as a combat engineer.
N. Vince Becker served in the United U.S. and Lieutenant 642. He was a radio man and he translated to Morse-coded messages. He served from 10/21/44 to 1946. He enlisted at 17 and was inducted at 18 into the USN Boot Camp Great Lakes, NTC. He spent 3 months at the radio school in Indianapolis, Centennial in the Philippines. He was assigned to Lieutenant 642-25 radio man when the war ended. He was granted emergency leave while in Japan. He ended up at Great Lakes, NTC. He was discharged 1946.
Bill Copeland was a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army from 1944 to 1947. Mr. Copeland was in the 3rd Division of the Army Corps of Engineers stationed in Europe.
William J. Darras served in the U.S. Air Force. He was ranked as an aviation cadet and was assigned the duty of a pilot. He served from February 1944 to November 1945. Darras enlisted at LYNN High School. He was called up after his 18th birthday and graduated from SEN High School. He was classified for pilot. They held 5,000 cadets on Hall, so he was sent to several air bases to work on airplanes. At the end of the war, he was discharged by an act of Congress. After the war, he went to college on the GI Bill and attended DePaul University of Chicago. He then went to Chicago Kent School of Law. His military experience did not fulfill his expectations. He is now retired at the age of 89 and lives at Friendship Village in Schaumburg, Illinois.
Charles P. F. Tizito served in the U.S. Navy, ranked as MOMM-2C from 1944 to 1946. One of his experiences includes learning a new language. He explains that there was no such thing as floors, walls, or ceilings. Everything, whether it be on shore, building, etc., was given a name as though it was aboard a ship.
Edward Charles Collins served in the Navy and is ranked as a BT-3. He was assigned the duty of USS Naval APA on the Okanagan ship. He served from November 1947 to November 1951. He enlisted in the Navy on his 17th birthday, November 22, 1947, and served for 4 years. He served during the Korean War on the USS Okanagan APA 220.
Richard Ostry served the military as a Marine. His rank was sergeant. His assigned duty was serving in Korea. He served from October 1951 to October 1954. Richard served in Korea in aircraft maintenance. His favorite plane is the Corsair.
Bill Powell served in the Army in a tank battalion. His rank was Private First Class. He was assigned to Germany. He served from October 1951 to October 1953. He was trained as a tank crewman, a loader, and a driver. A loader puts a shell into the tank's gun. He was stationed in Germany for over a year as part of an army of occupation of the country.
Herbert E. Kazin served in the Army. His rank was corporal. His assigned duty in the Army was post office and messenger. He served from 1957 to 1959. He was fortunate in that he was drafted into the Army during peacetime and served from 1957 to 1959. He was assigned to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training and spent the remainder of his time in Hawaii.
Thomas Zassadil was a sergeant first class in the U.S. Army and served October 1964 to April 1992. He was a senior instructor and served in the United States Army Reserves Unit. Mr. Zassadil retired after 24 years of service.
Jim Byrd served in the U.S. Air Force. He was ranked Technical Sergeant. He was assigned as Communications Specialist. He served from 1965 to 1987. He served in Vietnam and was the aircraft crew chief. His wife Cindy and son Todd also served.
Thomas C. Dzunsky was served to the Air National Guard. His rank was Buck Sergeant, assigned to the O'Hare Fuel. He served from 1966 to 1972. He tells a story that when returning from Germany to the United States, the landing gear was not functioning, and when we were flying over Europe, the captain decided to make an emergency landing. We had prepared for a crash landing. Fortunately, the ground crew worked feverishly and all turned out well. The air crew got the landing gear to work.
Eugene Lesberg served in the infantry. His ranks were Lieutenant Colonel. His assignment duty was in Vietnam 1966-1997. His dates served were November 1966, September 1994. He states the infantry was a great life and a changing experience. 28 years USR, he was in a rough combat zone in Vietnam. Afterwards, he was in the race rooms where he was involved in improving and oven all readiness of the 85th Division. He experienced a phased improvement in the attitude of the men, and training became more regular Army. He spent 4 summer camps at the Pentagon.
Rich Tack served in both the U.S. Navy and Marine, and his rank was HM2, or E5. Rich served in California, Vietnam, Japan, and Florida from 1966 to 1970. Mr. Tack stated, "I joined the U.S. Navy in November 1966. I wanted to become a pharmacist, and I was sent to the Hospital Corps School in San Diego. I was the draft by the Marines to become a medic in the Marines in Vietnam. In 1968, I was sent to Vietnam during the Tet Offensive. In Vietnam, I was a K-San Contingent in the DMZ. While in Contingent, I received a Purple Heart. In 1969, I was transferred back into the Navy and was stationed in Jacksonville, Florida. When I was discharged from the U.S. Navy in 1970.
Dewey Keyes was an E4 in the Army, assigned as Communication Security from 1967 to 1971. He stated, "I served 4 years in the Army during the Vietnam era. After 1 year of stateside training, I was sent to our 7th Division in South Korea. I spent 2 years there working in communication security. My team often worked near the heavily defended border with North Korea. The time spent there was often tense since we had to remain on alert. In the event, hostilities broke out with the North Koreans. Several months before my arrival, the North had seized one of our Navy ships with 82 crew members aboard. The crew wasn't released for 11 months. During my tour of duty, my team was proud to help out our troops keep their radio and telephone communications safe."
Gary Michael CABY served in the Army Security Agency as a medic from 1969 to 1971. Being in the Army during the Vietnam War was different from serving today. The war was unpopular at home, and most of us in the midst of the war were drafted. We all tried to do our jobs as well as we could. We were not celebrated when we came home. We just tried to get back to civilian life and build a life with our families.
Terry Lynn CABY served in the Air Defense Unit from 1969 to 1971. He achieved the rank of Sergeant E5 and had the assigned duty of Senior Track Mechanic, Recovery Specialist. During the Vietnam War, he would fly to fire bases and repair broken mechanical equipment. While there, if they were hit, he would do whatever was needed. He guarded convoys and fire bases at times. He learned a lot in the years he was in the Army. Some of it he enjoyed, and at other times it was difficult. Survival is the name of the game, no matter what you do.
Gary Ramos, at the rank of Airman in the U.S. Air Force, served as weatherman from 1970 to 1974.
Mr. Ramos was involved in various weather-related occupations, including rain-sound operations, which is weather balloons measuring various atmospheric parameters and transmits them to a fixed receiver. He also did extensive weather mapping and observations for forecasts. And did weather support for the U.S. Army. Mr. Ramos did prevailing wind studies support for air pollution research done by Argonne National Laboratories.
Floyd R. Hendricks was a unit commander in the 566th Air Force National Guard and the 126th Refueling Wing. This picture was taken on his first furlough home from being drafted out of his reteaching job.
Cindy Bird was in the U.S. Air Force. She was a technical surgeon and was a communications specialist. She served from 1977 to 1992.
Gabriela Rosales served in the Army National Guard. She was assigned to an administrative specialist. She served from 1999 to 2007. She worked with the Military Police Company, and now she raises her 3 wonderful children.
Derek Waters served in the Army National Guard. He was assigned to the Military Police and the Infantry. He served from 2002 to 2010. He served as a security for the convoys in Afghanistan to protect fellow soldiers.
Todd Bird was in the U.S. Marine Corps. He was a CPL corporal, and his assigned duty was intelligence specialist. He served from 2008 to 2012.
Jacob HINCHY is a specialist in the Army. Stationed at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, he signed up in August of 2013. After earning a bachelor's degree in history from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, Jacob HINCHY decided he wanted to work in a military museum. He joined the U.S. Army as a stepping stone towards that goal. He currently works in a veterans hospital as an X-ray technician. The X-ray technology is also used to examine artifacts. His proud mother is Miss Cheryl HINCHY, a LA and social studies teacher at Margaret Mead Junior High School.